In Stefano Domenicali's era, Formula One won't be seen as a hurdle to Max Verstappen and Red Bull's dominance. Even though some of Verstappen's rivals wouldn't mind seeing the tyranny end, the F1 CEO is here to act as the Dutchman's guardian angel. We'll be taking a look at that in today's video, plus the inside scoop on Daniel Ricciardo's decision to part ways with Red Bull, as told by Christian Horner, so stick around if you want to find out what exactly went down. While last season showcased Red Bull's strength with 17 victories out of 22 Grand Prix, this year's championship has caught Mercedes and Ferrari off guard. The anticipation is that he'll secure the remaining 2 victories in Las Vegas and Abu Dhabi, after Verstappen extended his record for the most wins in a single season during the Brazil race. Lewis Hamilton remarked that this might just be the start of Verstappen's impressive streak. Hamilton found himself more than a minute behind his rival when he crossed the finish line, securing the 8th spot and concluding what can only be described as a thoroughly dismal weekend for Mercedes. Expressing concern, Hamilton acknowledged that it might be a considerable amount of time before he and his team can mount a serious challenge against Verstappen's dominance again. He said, "Ultimately, all I can do is try to remain optimistic. The Red Bull, I think, is so far away. I think they're probably going to be very clear for the next couple of years." Hamilton's comment carried a weighty impact, and it probably resonated throughout the entire pit lane. The big question arises, could Formula One ever step in to intervene and rein in Verstappen's seemingly demoralizing dominance? When asked by Channel 4, F1 chief Domenicali shared his perspective, saying, "I think if you look back at the dominance of a driver or a team, it's always been a part of F1. We need to consider one thing that for sure Max Verstappen has done and is doing an incredible job. We need to recognize that. But if you see today at the gaps in qualified, it's just incredible. If you look at the numbers of overtaking we're having the last 2 seasons, we are at the top of the scale. We cannot be seen as a sport that is trying to do something against someone. That would be wrong. But that doesn't imply that the ex-Ferrari team boss isn't crossing his fingers for a more tightly contested competition in the upcoming season." He went on to say that. On the other hand, the nature of Formula One is to make sure that next year the teams can give to the other drivers that are very, very strong the possibility to compete in that field. I have to say that we never had such an incredible quality of drivers altogether as we have today. I mean, it's impressive. This season, Verstappen has been rewriting Formula One's record books, and his latest achievement of 17 wins in a single campaign is just one of many. Following his triumph in Brazil on Sunday, his win percentage for the season stands at 77.3%, a remarkable feat that surpasses Alberto Ascari's 1952 record of 75%, assuming he doesn't secure victories in Las Vegas and Abu Dhabi. Verstappen's impressive streak of 10 consecutive wins from Miami to Italy this year set a new record, surpassing Sebastian Vettel's 2013 tally. Additionally, he holds the record for the most wins from pole in a season, with an impressive 11 victories, and he has also clinched the most consecutive wins from pole position, converting 15 in a streak that dates back to last year's Dutch Grand Prix. When you consider the most hat-tricks, points, podiums, and laps led in a single campaign, it's difficult to argue against the notion that this is the most dominant season for a driver in the history of Formula One. Verstappen's dominance has reached a point where even missing out on the Driver of the Day title becomes a discussion. Despite outperforming Lando Norris in the Brazilian Grand Prix, Verstappen secured only 6% of the Driver of the Day votes, losing out to the McLaren star in that particular race. Launched in 2016, Formula One's Driver of the Day is bestowed upon the driver who garners the highest number of votes from fans during each Grand Prix. It's safe to say that this accolade is less about the final result and more about the fans' perspective on who stole the spotlight in that race. In the current season, McLaren's Norris has clinched the highest number of votes for Driver of the Day on 5 occasions, while Verstappen and his teammate Perez are tied at 3 each. Interestingly, despite Verstappen winning 17 Grand Prix, Perez securing 2, and Norris not yet claiming a victory, it's evident that leading the pack on the track isn't the sole determining factor for the voters. Brundle finds it quite intriguing, particularly considering that Norris received his latest award last Sunday in Brazil. On that day, Norris finished second to Verstappen, who not only set a new record for the most wins in a single season, but also surpassed Alberto Ascari's win percentage record and overtook Alain Prost on the all-time win list. He wrote in his Sky Sports column that Lando Norris would take a point for fastest lap and yet again the fans' driver of the day, with 26.7% of the vote. The driver who dominated the weekend, like he's dominated the past 2 seasons, and who surpassed Alain Prost with 52 victories, was fourth most popular, with just 6% of the vote. I don't know how many people actually vote, but I find all that quite fascinating, to say the least. In a recent revelation, Christian Horner spilled the beans, sharing that Red Bull was ready to almost double Daniel Ricciardo's salary in a bid to prevent his move to Renault in 2019. Ricciardo, a long-standing member of the Red Bull family, had been associated with Toro Rosso and later Red Bull, making his shift to Renault quite surprising. Leaving a team that secured P3 in the 2018 standings for one finishing at P4 and trailing by 297 points, Ricciardo's decision left Horner questioning if he was taking the piss. Back in 2018, Red Bull had a driver duo of Ricciardo and the emerging talent Max Verstappen. As Verstappen showcased his true potential, Ricciardo started feeling overshadowed. Despite initially contemplating staying, the 29-year-old ultimately decided to part ways with Red Bull. Christian Horner did a tell-all on the F1 with DRS podcast, disclosing that Red Bull was ready to match the $10 million contract they had recently offered Verstappen in an effort to retain Ricciardo. Horner said, "So we gave Max a contract at the beginning of that year in 2018 to secure his future. Daniel, I remember being upset at the time. He suddenly felt that, hang on, I don't want to be the support act here, and I could tell he was starting to think of being a bigger fish in a smaller pond. He got a lot of noise in his ear, and that this is the money that is also on the table from other teams. But I remember I spoke to our owner, Dietrich Mateschitz, before the Austrian Grand Prix and said it's looking a bit marginal with Daniel. Can you just show him some love? Because, Helmut Marko, obviously very pro-Max. But I think if you could just balance things out, just let him know that you want him. No problem, I'll speak to him." So he took him upstairs after the race in Austria, and they were gone for well over an hour, and then they re-emerged. They reappeared both with smiles on their faces. Dietrich comes up to me. I said, "Well, how did it go?" And he said, "No problem. It's not even a question." I said, "Well, what did you agree with him?" He said, "I said we'll give him whatever Max is on." I was like, wow. "Do you know what we pay Max?" And so I gave him the number and he said, "Who the fuck agreed to that?" And I said, "Well, you." Even though Mateschitz was taken aback by the hefty sum exiting the company's bank account, he honoured his commitment and extended the same deal to Ricciardo, a proposition that the Australian seemed inclined to accept. The decision to move from a team contending for wins and podiums to one further down the grid left Horner in disbelief. The extent of the surprise was such that he thought the good-natured Ricciardo might be playing a prank. Because Daniel's got a sense of humour, I was convinced he's taking the piss here. "You're not going to Renault. Stop f***ing about. Just tell me when you're going to sign that contract." So, after about 10 minutes, he finally persuaded me that he was going to go to Renault, and it was disappointing. It actually was during the pandemic year. Daniel called me and he said, "Christian, I hate to say this, but you are absolutely right. And I apologise and all that, and so on." Where would Red Bull be today had Daniel Ricciardo stayed? Tell us your theory in the comments section down below. And, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Thanks for watching.